March 21st, it's the New Zealand Aviation podcast. It's been, a week and a half, 2 weeks since the last one. Martin Noakes joins me from Brisbane, Australia. Kia ora, Martin. Good to talk with you again.
G'day, Paul.
Obviously, I have to mention that it's been a pretty grim week or so, almost a week or so in this country for obvious reasons. You know all about that. It's been reported around the world, this terrible massacre. And we certainly have in our thoughts the victims, the families, the first responders, everybody associated with such a terrible thing. I've been involved in media, Martin, the last few days. And, it's been very sad on one hand, obviously, but very uplifting as well when you see the human reaction to something like this and the way a country can pull together, you know?
Yes. I've been watching that part of it as well, and it has been amazing.
Of course, in these situations, people can get caught. Air New Zealand were caught with their algorithms, responding to obviously a very short period of time of a surge of demand. And what happens? The airfares escalate to, I think people were being quoted 800 return to get to Christchurch from Auckland on that day and the day after. It seems that they were sort of caught napping there.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, automated systems tend to do that.
So I guess, I'm second guessing. I don't know quite how it works, but the system senses a surge in demand, and the algorithms go to work, and they start trying to work out the value of seats in the surging demand situation. The AI kicks in, I guess.
Well, if it was AI, it might be a bit better, but it's just it'll just be a simple demand algorithm, well, relatively simple, and it notices a surge in demand and starts raising the prices, regardless of whether there's seats or not. Well, and it turns out there were seats because they could drop the prices and people could still get to Christchurch. So interesting.
It took it seems, the shareholding minister, Grant Robertson, the finance minister, to actually call. I wonder who he called, whether it was the chairman of the board or the CEO, probably the CEO. I think the day after, or even on the Sunday after, to maybe it was on the Saturday night, to nudge them a bit, given that on behalf of all us taxpayers, the government owns 52% of the airline. I don't know where that leaves the management, but that's what it took, it seems, to have the management become aware of the situation, which again tells me that there's a kind of napping on the job thing going on.
Well, there was a lot going on, and perhaps they were a bit distracted, but it did take the minister to step in.
Anyway, so they reacted quickly and maybe avoided, worse publicity. But that came on the back of already not a very good impression of Air New Zealand as the national airline. So you've got to be careful, don't you, with your reputation. Anyway, enough said on that. They're coming to the party now, and good on them. I don't know where to start, Martin. There's so much around. I guess we really should start with the 737 MAX and the Ethiopian crash. I think flight, what was it? It was a 302, Addis Ababa through to Nairobi, if I remember. Of course, Ethiopian, a proud airline with a long history, and Addis Ababa is a hub for their global operation, so inevitably a United Nations of passengers on board.
Amazing how many people from how many countries are on board that plane. I must admit, I knew that Air Ethiopia was, how would you say, a very important carrier in that part of the world, but I just didn't realize that many people flew on Air Ethiopia. But I've been doing a bit of reading about it, and that's one of the reasons Air Ethiopia has been so successful. They've never had the traditional north-south route of African colony nations. They've always done east-west. They've always done things like join China to South America and stuff like this. And it just shows you how well that strategy was working for them. They're also a major carrier for the food relief and United Nations in that region. And apparently a lot of the people on that plane were flying to a conference in Kenya.
They were. Yeah, United Nations or UNESCO or one of those organizations development conference. And even more on that, they're operating from an airport which is 7,200 feet above sea level.
Yes. And they fly the MAX to Johannesburg. And when I heard that, I thought, geez, that's interesting. So That's a airport which is 1,700 meters above sea level in Joburg, and flying all the way to Ethiopia to another very, very high airport in a 737.
Yeah.
Now, in the old days, a 747 had to leave Johannesburg and stop in Kenya for fuel.
Such as the efficiency gain over those years.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah.
So it seems that the evidence that's come out a few days after that crash anyway must have tracked pretty closely to the Lion Air situation, because it seems pretty certain you wouldn't be seeing a grounding of the fleet and Trump signing that off. If that wasn't the case. I've been looking into this, trying to get an idea of what how the MAX was pitched, right, to the customers, because I think that comes down to that, doesn't it? And really, the differences training turns out to be on an iPad between 90 minutes and 2.5 hours worth of differences training, and that's it. It didn't even involve anything in the sim.
Yeah. So that's obviously a very important part of the pitching the whole family, is that there is essentially, or was essentially, seen to be no difference between the planes. Hey guys, it's a 737. It's slightly better. Here you go. Start flying.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah. Yeah, and obviously, you know, that I mean, I'm pretty sure, this is my opinion and what I've read. I'm pretty sure that at the end of the day, a 737 MAX and an A320 Neo, or A321 Neo, whatever you want, they're probably economically quite similar to run on the routes that they run, and that they're probably quite similar. And I wouldn't be surprised if the airlines, the only real pushback the airlines were having was saying on Boeing was saying, you know, at the end of the day, the planes are very, very similar, but the Airbus is easier to train people on, and you've got to make the Boeing a bit simpler. And I wonder whether that's led Boeing to try and add as much as they can to the 737 MAX to make it more, not more Airbus-like, but simpler to operate, because there apparently are quite big changes to that plane. Well, if you think about it, it's carrying 210 people now. This is the 8 MAX, not even the 9 MAX. The 8 MAX can carry 210 people. It's vastly more powerful. It's vastly more capable, but it's essentially still the same plane that was rolled out in 1967.
That's right. And with airlines with big fleets of the earlier models, part of the great business deal in selling them this model, the way it looks like it's been pitched, is that there's very little investment in any training that you'll need to do, yet you'll have this great step up, and that's where these overlays of software and but that being said, just the very is it a cavalier attitude or the idea that you can, you know, give something on an iPad for 90 minutes, not even put them in the sim. It turns out, from what I've been reading, that some pilots were, even before that, demanding that they have sim time, you know, in the aircraft to, and now, of course, everyone's going into the sim and learning how to turn the trim off, you know. But the design is one thing. The functionality in the actual aircraft for disconnecting this thing seems to be have been a big problem as well. I don't know if I've read it wrong, but I know there are those two pedestal switches that have always been on 737s. So you can actually turn the auto trim off and spin the wheel or whatever, or use the yoke control manually. And from what I've read, the disconnect on the yoke is only while you've got your button pushed in. You take it out again, and the system cuts back in. Now, that surely, if that's the case, that's a recipe for confusion and disaster. That's a crazy thing to have.
It does seem very strange, yeah. And yeah, all the commentary I've read about that saying that's not the behavior we expect. So the pilots are thinking, well, they've interviewed a few, and it's interesting. They've all been off. Well, I don't know if it's interesting, but they've all been off the record, and they've been saying, yeah, we don't expect to have to do that. We want to fire and forget. We want to push the button and know that it's off, and then move on to the next problem.
Yeah, we
don't have to sit there with our finger on the button.
Or, well, you might not even be able to work that out. You're thinking, why is this the earlier model always disconnected? Why? And now you're looking for other things on other panels as to why that might be happening. I saw the trace of the what I think was on the Prune site of the one of the flight data recording outputs or parameters from the Lion Air crash, and it was that very thing: trim, disconnect, reconnect, and you could see exactly from the trace of the disconnection and the reconnection and the nose up, nose down attitude that went with that. You could clearly see that pilot was punching this button, multiple times. Yeah, repeatedly. And every time he let it go, the aircraft did its own thing again. And I think porpoising has been described as one of the effects that was noticed in the data. And that would absolutely explain the porpoising action. Totally.
Yeah. And it's I'm sort of almost lost for words. It's quite interesting that's a behavior that no one thought to check.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, Seattle Times always has great articles particularly about Boeing, but about commercial aviation in general, and they've put some really nice diagrams up on their site, and the one thing that they spend a lot of time talking about is that the 737 MAX has got 2 angle of attack indicators, right? As expected, right? In case one fails, you've got another one.
Yeah.
But the MCAS system is only connected to one. MCAS is only taking information from one angle of attack sensor, so it's not polling both of them. And they're saying if you've got a slightly faulty angle of attack sensor, and they do seem to be thinking that the angle of attack sensors are faulty because when the Lion Air crash happened, I think it was Southwest, they went out and changed all their angle of attack sensors.
Wow. Okay. Well, that tells you something, doesn't it?
Yeah, but it's highly unusual in automated systems, especially ones which are really important to the safety of the aircraft, to use only one sensor. Even more amazing is there are 2, and they still decided to only use one. And I think that the software update that Boeing are going to start rolling out, it's going to take input from both angle of attack sensors and make sure they agree before it makes a decision. However, what's happening now is that the FAA is now doing a formal review of the 737 MAX certificate to fly. The Department of Justice is getting involved. The Canadians have now said we are not going to accept the FAA certificate to fly automatically from now on. We're going to certify the planes ourselves, or at least check the planes ourselves. The Europeans are looking like they do the same thing. But interestingly for Boeing, China is now saying they want to certify the aircraft to their standards themselves. Now, that's particularly interesting because back in the 70s, when they were trying to sell aircraft into China, China said the same thing. They wanted to certify the planes themselves, and Boeing and the American government lent on them and said, we don't want to give you all the information about how to certify a plane. The real reason being is we don't want you to learn that much about certifying planes because we don't want to we don't want to help your internal aircraft industry. Because of all the data, Boeing, with aerodynamic data and everything, Boeing would then have to give China to help with the certification process. So that's a big deal because I wonder how soon that plane will be back in the air if everyone wants to recertify the thing.
Well, interesting you're talking about the Chinese situation because remember, back in the day, McDonnell Douglas sold the MD narrow body series to Chinese airlines, but they had to assemble in China. And hey presto, look what happened. Their regional jet looks like a DC-9, man. It looks like a 717. So you can see where that comes from. I'm reading the New Yorker magazine. I found an article in the New Yorker, and it's talking about the 73 MAX here, and this says here that Boeing analysis understated the power of the new flight control system, and that's from a Seattle Times article. When the planes later entered service, MCAS was capable of moving the horizontal stabilizer more than 4 times farther than was stated in the initial safety analysis document. The Boeing analysis also failed to account for how the system could reset itself each time a pilot responded, thereby missing the potential impact of the system repeatedly pushing the airplane's nose downward.
Yeah,
that about says it all, doesn't it?
It does, and they were talking to a guy, I think it was on CNN, which is unusual because I barely watch CNN.
Poor thing.
Times. The guy said the loads when that stabilizes in full nose down trim, once you get above a certain speed, it stops porpoising. You're not going to be able to fight it.
Yeah, I think it took, just in the initial part of the thing running away, it took, I read, a combined 40 pounds pressure from each pilot on the yokes to overcome it.
Yeah.
that's a lot. That's a hell of a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
And then Boeing issued that press release saying, "Oh, we're going to issue a software update." They were kind of down talking the level of the software update, saying making a safe plane even safer. It's just that's corporate. Oh, it's just out of control.
Also, it seems that the FAA has been outsourcing pretty well a lot of the data confirmation to the manufacturer, which the fox gets in charge of the hen house is a bad situation as well. So I think you're going to see a lot of things happen here. I might have read it wrongly, Martin, but someone said and crunched the numbers that the time period since the MAX was put into service, the two crashes, is about as bad as the Comet situation back in the 50s, late 50s. The same tempo, and look and that was a disaster back then. So to be able to repeat that now is pretty stunning if you think about it like that.
Yeah, it's not a great introduction to service, and Boeing, I don't want to, whether it's Boeing or whether it's the corporate environment or how they do things in America, they have a history of sort of stonewalling, and you might say you do stonewall in the beginning to avoid conjecture and all this type of thing. But back in the 60s, you had the 727s, introduction to service of the 727s. They had 4 727 crashes in the space of a very few months, and 2 of them were within the same week. Okay, they were traced back to insufficient training. So pilots were moving from prop liners into effectively very fast 727s, and they were battling on the landing because they were all landing accidents. So not really an aircraft fault, but
it was high drag, high power getting caught by that.
You had the 737 rudder reversal in the 90s, and Boeing sort of basically refused to admit there was a problem until one poor guy managed to drag it back to the airport. And it was their plane to see what had happened, and then Boeing fixed it. Then you had the 767 thrust reversal issue.
That's right, the louder air. Over Bangkok.
The louder air. And then you had the 787 battery, and they basically refused to admit there was an issue until you had planes landing with the sort of molten lithium-ion batteries dripping out the bottom of the plane. And, it's... Yeah, I mean, I'd like to see how Airbus would respond to a similar problem.
I see that Airbus in their corporate communications the last week or so have been supportive of Boeing and making the point that they're not going to be, commenting on it, and that safety was everybody's priority and we're all one when we're dealing with safety. How do you think this will, because there's, I think, over 4,000 sales booked for the 737 MAX. I wonder how that's going. I mean, Boeing can't afford to have a big problem with that program, surely.
And let's face it, they don't. I mean, it's a big problem, but it's not an insurmountable problem. The plane will fly again, and it'll be fine.
Yeah, but the damage is done, isn't it? People are because of modern communication. Maybe not too long ago in the past, all this information would be reported by a handful of global news organizations. Now people talk about it in every forum, and people know the name of the plane, and it could be that they will seek out anything except a 737 MAX plane. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah. They certainly in the short term that is likely to happen. But it'll these things will blow over, and it'll go on and have a successful career. But it'll always be talked of. That's the thing for Boeing. That'll always be spoken about. And then also the opportunity Boeing lost with the 777-9X.
Oh, I was going to get on to that. Yeah.
Yeah, it was a non-event because they didn't want any press, so they just rolled it out to the company. There's been no public unveiling.
This was I've got the tweet in front of me that they put out. They said, following the tragic loss of Ethiopian Airlines Flight 302, we are respectfully postponing the external 777X global debut activities, including broadcasts on our social media channels. It's an impressive
Yeah.
aircraft. I've seen the pictures that have been put up from, I think they described it as a staff rollout, but it's got the folding wings, and I think it's the longest passenger jet that's ever been made, longer than the A340-600 and the 748. So, it's there. I mean, it's probably going to be a world-beating product, right?
Yeah, I'm sure it will be. Yeah,
400. 17,200 kilometres, my golly.
Yeah, it's a big plane.
We'd be up for it, wouldn't we? Air New Zealand would be very interested in that.
I don't know whether they need 400 people.
Good point.
It's a lot of people.
Yeah,
it's a lot of people, and you see how the airlines are mixing it up. It's A350s and 777s. So that's Lufthansa's interesting. They've ordered I think they've taken some more 777s, but they've taken even more A350s.
Yeah. Let's get onto that, because I noticed that Lufthansa are going to be returning 6 A380s. Not good for the A380, is it? You'd think that Lufthansa would be able to fill them up. But they're also purchasing, I think they're going for 20 787-9s, but they're also doing another 20 A350-900s. So, Airbus doesn't lose necessarily, but I'm surprised that Lufthansa can't find work for those A380s.
Yeah. Yeah, no, we've been constantly surprised by that ever since the program was launched, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I don't quite understand
all these people all these people complaining about the fact that the A380 is uneconomical, and yet they're not putting the extra 250 seats in it that the plane could carry.
And that slot restriction thing, which, was part of the business model, doesn't seem to have, been the showstopper that it was supposed to be for increasing frequencies at those airports. That hasn't been enough.
Well, I think that's a bit like, the forecasted famine in the 70s and 80s, and the fact that we're going to run out of oil in the 90s. I think when push comes to shove and they actually look the problem square in the eye, they work out, we can add another 20% to this airport. And as air traffic control procedures and processes get more and more smarter, and they can get them cram everything in tighter.
Yeah, I just
don't think it's an actual problem.
Oh, well, and I see that Etihad is, are they struggling? 7.8 billion in losses, I think, in the last number of years. Their shareholdings in the various airlines that they've bought into, Alitalia, Air Berlin, Jet Airways in India, they're all... they're either selling out or the airlines have gone bust. I think they had 40 A350s on order, around that amount. Now they're down. They've reduced that to 6. So I don't know what's going to happen to Etihad. I think that is like the word for togetherness in Arabic. I think I read somewhere. But, how could they have gone so wrong when right next door there's the example of the most successful hub-based international airline in the world? I don't get it.
Which is reducing capacity, though. And so all the airlines in that region are reducing capacity. Emirates is from a very strong position. Etihad from a very, very bad position. But, it always struck me with Etihad and Emirates, that'd be the equivalent of having Air New Zealand based where they are, and Air Aotearoa, based in West Auckland, both trying to be successful airlines, because they're right next to each other.
Yeah,
they're serving the same. Yeah, the route network's very, very similar, and you think, well, how can that work? And there's been talk bubbling along for a long time that Emirates is going to absorb Etihad, and it would probably make sense.
Yeah,
I don't get it. And the guy, the guy, what was his name? Was his name James Dixon? Was he the
Aussie guy?
One of the ex-Ansett guy, right?
Yeah, I think. I don't know if that's the name, but I know who you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, it was his policy to go and build up minority holdings in lots and lots of little airlines. But that's exactly the same policy the American guy who ran Swissair for a few years back in the 90s had, and it killed Swissair. Investing in dodgy little airlines, especially minority stakes all over the world, it's not a good way to invest your money.
Well, you think of the hit they must have taken on Air Berlin. Crikey, I mean...
Yeah, and what's the point of a minority stake in an airline? So you spend all the money, but you get nothing to say.
Well, what they're trying to do, obviously, and they did that with Virgin too in Australia, didn't they? Buy a 14 or 20% share of that. They want to obviously feed passengers out of particular regions through those other airlines to their global hub network.
Yeah.
But it hasn't. It kind of hasn't worked out.
It doesn't work. It doesn't work. No. And alliances. I mean, I don't understand alliances anyway. I mean, this has nothing to do with Air New Zealand, but it's a thing you see on lots of them. Is okay, I want to fly to Hong Kong, and I'm a premium member of the Gold Club or whatever they're calling it, and I get to the airport and I get on a Cathay Pacific flight.
Yeah.
What's that about?
Yeah.
they're not even in the same alliance.
Yeah. I guess they're just hoping that, like you mentioned last podcast, what's the difference between the inside of this tube and the inside of that? And the average person goes, I don't understand.
Yeah, well, they're exactly right, but they never want to admit that. And that brings up a subject we need to address in perhaps one of the next podcasts, is the relevance of flag carriers in this day and age.
Yeah.
Actual flag carriers. We'll talk about that. But anyway, yeah, no, poor old Etihad. Apparently they're great. They're a great airline to fly.
Yeah, well, they've got that, what was it, that 3-bedroom, first-class, ultimate luxury, what is it, a residence thing in the A380s. But it looks like they've even had trouble filling or making that work.
Yeah, well, yeah. Yeah, I'm not surprised.
Okay, so, but of course, national pride, what's it, Abu Dhabi is their base, isn't it? National pride is going to probably keep them flying. Would have to.
I expect so, yeah.
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 Moving on to another issue, and that is the Amazon Air cargo crash. They're saying now it looks like this is the 767-300 cargo jet that was they're heading towards Houston, I think, wasn't it? On an Amazon freight flight. A US Postal Service and Amazon cargo on board. And I'm reading from the Business Insider here. They say that the pilot's actions have been reported to the NTSB as unusual. And they're saying that it could have been pilot error that caused this. The crew they entered some turbulence shortly before landing. It says here that the engines increased to maximum thrust. Maximum? That's a lot of thrust.
Yeah. It is.
After which the airplane's pitch turned slightly up. And it says here that startled the cockpit crew. Well, you can only be startled if it happens without your command, right?
Right. Yeah.
And then the plane nose down, 49-degree angle. That's going down.
Very steep.
Hit 495 miles an hour as it dropped. They pulled the plane up, it says here, the crew to a 20-degree angle. Ultimately, in the last 18 seconds of the plane's descent, the crew lost control. Again, could have been a runaway stabilizer or a cargo shift. That's the other thing.
When I read that, the first report on that, I wondered whether it was cargo shift,
Yeah. So you imagine if a couple of the heavy containers let go, banged into another two, they all slid down the back because, depending on the loading, I've seen those freighters loaded up. Not necessarily every station is utilised. It depends on weight and balance. And you can just imagine everything sliding to the back. And, what would you do in that situation if you're an autopilot? The cargo shifts to the back all of a sudden, the nose rears up, and you're on auto throttle. The auto throttle would instantaneously put the power up, right?
Yeah.
You bowl the nose down, then all the cargo is just bang the other way.
Yeah.
And then
what would I do? Geez, I'd get out.
Well, you can imagine. They've got those 9G bloody things to stop the containers smashing through the cockpit bulkhead or wall, but from behind. But if the thing's loose and you've got 10 tons sliding forward again, all the way forward, I'm thinking that probably is a very likely scenario.
Well, that was my initial thought. In a cargo plane, blah blah blah, cargo shifting. And you're not going to recover from that.
Well, everyone remembers the footage of that National Airline 74-400 freighter out of Kabul or wherever it was, the Air Force base in in Afghanistan, and I think they had heavy military vehicles on board. They're pulling out of the area, and look what happened there. I mean,
I was a bit shaken watching that video. That was a shocker.
That was one of the most amazing crash bits of crash footage I have ever seen.
Yeah, no, that was terrible.
And here's the thing: I mean, the aircraft was starting to recover in that, but you know what was going to happen if that load was loose? That they weren't out of trouble, even if it had recovered. They still weren't out of trouble.
He needed another 5,000 feet to recover. Unfortunately, Afghanistan was in the way. Yeah,
that's right. Man, that was disturbing. But that's what happens when the load shifts.
Yeah.
So So there's I mean, I've been following that one quite closely, and a lot of it didn't make sense until that information about the power being applied. That's an auto throttle situation.
And it seems to be a terrible. Of the three crashes I know about that have gone down into swamps, there was the Value Jet.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah, with the oxygen canisters. Yep.
Yeah, and that just obliterated itself.
Yeah.
Right.
I had a friend of mine, by the way, Martin, who was an accident investigator on that, and hearing the difficulty of recovery in the Everglades was like, it was very difficult.
And they're saying the same thing about this Houston accident. They said there's very little to recover. I mean, your plane goes into 5 foot of muddy water and solid ground at anything, at speed. It's very difficult to get anything out. But then you had remember the TriStar that went down into the Everglades, and that was as gentle as.
Yeah,
I guess they were descending at 20 feet a minute or something.
That's right. They did a gentle flight into the Everglades because they were fixated, I think, on a bulb, a blown bulb in the undercarriage display. Yeah.
Yeah. It turns out they didn't need the undercarriage.
The other thing was it showed too that I think there only 2 pounds of pressure was required to on the yoke to disconnect the autopilot, and just leaning on it could do it, and they didn't even realize they'd done that.
Wow.
So that's why that I read about that. Of course, it's all supposed to be haunted and everything too, the ghosts of whatever that flight was. Eastern Airlines, wasn't it?
Yeah.
A brand new TriStar. I think it was only like a 2 weeks old or 3 weeks old or something.
And that there was only like 2 survivors on it or something, weren't there?
Yeah, I think there were quite a few because of the way it. Mind you, they hit fast because they were flying around without flaps, so they would have been above about 240 knots, so they hit fast. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, so because the 76 is, I think we can all agree, is a very safe aircraft. It's proven itself big time.
Yeah. My favorite plane, actually, when I used to fly to Japan a lot, I was always very pleased when it turns out we got the 767. It took a bit longer. It took actually significantly longer, grinding along. But it's just a nice cabin, it's 7 abreast. It was just a nice flight.
And great legs. Boy, did that end up having long legs there. New Zealand used to operate it up, I think, one stop through Tahiti up to LA. Used to see Air New Zealand 76s at LA a lot.
Yeah.
Long legs. And, of course, those old Air New Zealand ones, I think they're still flying, aren't they, in various fleets? Iceland Air or something like that, they're flying them.
Doesn't Amazon have a couple?
Maybe Amazon has a couple, yeah. Though I think most of them are Qantas. Ex-Qantas.
Oh, okay. Qantas never put the winglets on theirs, did they?
No, they didn't. They had those roller versions too that I think they got off BA, didn't they? With the Rolls-Royce engines on them. Anyway.
Yeah.
Okay, so what else can we... MH370. Now what I do, Martin, is I go through and I see what the latest stories are for MH370. And it seems that bits of wreckage are washing up. And there doesn't seem to be any argument as to whether these are parts of this plane, because the serial numbers, when I'm looking at some of these news stories, the serial numbers and the identification on the parts confirm that it is either part of a 777 or part of this aircraft. So the fact that it's crashed into the sea and in bits is probably not in doubt, right? Though some people, there's one theory out there that's saying that it might have been captured by the Russians, which is an unusual one. But they're still trying to pin it on the pilot. I see here, I'm reading from The Sun. Okay, it's The Sun, but this is where these stories are coming out. A retired pilot has amazingly claimed MH370 was flown towards a secret runway following a terrifying mid-air hijack by one of the crew. It's a former United Airlines employee they state here as a former 747 pilot. He believes the packed passenger plane was flown to a pre-planned location on land or was dumped into the ocean. No kidding. And he's fingering the pilot. The plane took off, and it did the initial route up to a point, but something took place in that cockpit. Somebody had to program that initial left turn. No one has to program a left turn.
No.
All you got to do is, even if the autopilot is on, is you just got to push the yoke down hard to the left, and you're in a left turn.
Yeah.
So I don't see what's so...
No. Yeah, it's just these stories are just...
He said the former US Air Force pilot claimed there's zero possibility the plane's disappearance could be the result of an accident. Well, how can you say that? But that's one of the stories. We've got another one here. And there's MH370 plane fragments linked to murder of official. This is interesting. The Consul General on behalf of the Malaysian government in Madagascar has been murdered. He was shot dead, I think, about a week ago, and he was going to accompany the parts back to Malaysia for analysis, and then he's shot. I mean, that's bizarre, and people are putting up various reasons for that. He might have been involved in some shady business deal, all that sort of stuff. But and there's another sort of like a bounty hunter type guy by the name of Blaine Gibson, who's found parts of the plane and is caught up in this, and that is again at Madagascar. So, you know, the fact that I find it odd that there are parts out there, but the search has stopped, and they've never looked in that part of the world. Am I wrong?
Yeah, that is. I do find that odd. I do find, and the fact that parts are washing up, I doubt they're floating around the open ocean. It seems to indicate to me that they must be relatively shallow, where tidal action or something can be affecting them, because it keeps sending them up on the beach, and all the parts have been found either or in that channel between Madagascar and Africa, and on the islands in that region. Yeah, well, very, very interesting.
Also, the critics of this guy Blaine Gibson, who's describes himself as a sort of like a private investigator, they're saying that pillaged parts from MH17 are being used to, which is the other 777 shot down over Ukraine, and these parts are finding their way to this part of the world and then being used as evidence that these are bits of the other plane. So it gets weirder and weirder.
That's weird, because if you needed parts for a 777, an old 777, you could go to the boneyards in the desert and probably buy a truckload of 777 parts for not very much money. Yeah. Old, bits of fuselage and that, and chuck it in the sea.
Yeah, broken bits.
So I don't get that. Yeah. Just before we move on, and this ties in with the other story I want to do about flag carriers. Looks like Air Malaysia or Malaysian Airlines, they're deciding its future very soon, whether or not they even have Malaysian Airlines.
Wow.
The government is deciding what to do, because they're just losing too much money.
Wasn't there another possibility of another airline sort of sniffing around?
Yeah, but who would?
It's that AirAsia that's killed them, right?
Absolutely. And similar things what happened in Hungary. Hungary used to have their own airline, Malev. I don't know if the Czechoslovakia or Czech and Slovakia, I think CSA died. I don't know who they use now, but there's that airline in that region. It's called Wizz Air.
Yeah, Wizz, yeah.
Yeah, and that's taken over.
It's huge.
Yeah, it's really big. And AirAsia is massive. I was surprised. Yeah. We see the flight to Auckland, Coolangatta and on. But they're like 4 times Asian Airlines.
Okay, well, again, when it's the national flag carrier, it's a bit of a psyche of the nation type thing, and it'd be a hard call, wouldn't it?
Oh, apparently, but in the end, and we'll talk about this, I don't really think it makes any difference. Right.
Well, maybe even the concept of national flag carriers is sort of redundant now. I mean, look at BA. They're not really owned. They're not the BA of old. They're part of a group, and they're just a brand in a group, right?
Yeah. Although that 747 painted up in BOAC colours does look pretty nice.
I see that the Landor one has come through. I've seen the footage of that, and of course the BEA A319, and the next one is the one that we. I forget because you named all the liveries last time, but it's the one that came before the Landor. That's still to come on a 747. That's going to look good too. But boy, that BOAC, man, that looks good. That's tidy. That looks good.
And the 737s that Qantas are painted up in their old livery also just look fantastic.
And of course, I get back to here, and I've done countless Photoshop renderings of how retro liveries in New Zealand would look, and they never ever go there. They just. And I mean, there's just such evidence that these things are incredibly popular. They raise national pride. They do all sorts of things. But we never do it.
They'll do it soon. They've got to do something soon. People have been bored of the silly videos.
Yeah, and they've got to show that they're national, their heritage, and they've been around, and we're part of the New Zealand story. All these things, they're going to have to fall back on that pretty hard to offset this perception now that they overcharge, basically.
Yeah. Yeah, I never said that, by the way.
You never said that they overcharged.
No, I'm just putting it out there. I'm withdrawing myself from that terrible assertion, Mr. Brendan.
I think you've just been completely brainwashed by the Jetstar people.
That's it. Yeah. But they're so unreliable. Remember?
Oh yeah, they are, and they're really nasty too. They're just not very nice people, you know.
Yeah.
Whereas the Kiwis, it's so nice, and it's just like stepping on board New Zealand when you get on. And boy, do you pay for that.
Yeah.
Now,
how are we doing?
I'm going to update you on Bring Our Birds Home, and things are always happening, but let's come up to date on that. I'm making contact with probably the most experienced Hawker Siddeley 748 engineer in the world, who's a Kiwi, who I met back in the 90s. His name is Alan. He's based in Africa at the moment. And what I want to do is I want to talk to him and see if we can go and see this 748 in Bangladesh, and he can tell me whether it will fly again or not. If anyone knows, he will know. And if it is possible, he knows where all the parts are as well. So that'll be an interesting thing.
That will be.
Really keen on retrieving that aircraft. Now, we were to speak with Captain Canada, decided in the light, because that was going to be quite a light-hearted, entertaining discussion, and I sort of decided in the last few days that after the events of last week, we'll just let, it's great to have a laugh, but we'll just get over that thing before we sort of do more entertainment-based stuff. Though Kyle, who is Captain Canada, his online business model is fascinating, and I really want to find out about that and how that's going for him. So we'll put that off to the next podcast. That's no problem. But what I will be doing in the next day or so, Martin, is I'll be talking to our guy Caesar in Brazil, and he's been facilitating all the work on trying to secure the DC-8, which is at Manaus, and he's right across the whole thing. He's done great work for us. I think it's time for the Bring Our Birds Home family, as I'm calling them now, and of course our listeners, and we have so many listeners now. And thank you for all the feedback and everything. Fantastic. Introduce him and really get right up to date with where we are legally, and for him to explain firsthand why this thing's taking a while. Basically, we're dealing with the bureaucracy that you get in countries like Brazil, and also their big political changes. I don't think, Martin, people realize how much change is going on politically in Brazil. It's big. Bolsonaro is a huge change, and everything is reshuffling. The whole power structure is reshuffling, and that's judicial right on down. So that's an added layer. So we'll be talking to him. But in the next few days, I hope to bring on a very serious marketing person who's led big advertising agencies, whose father was one of the original 737 captains. I won't name any names yet, but he's coming on, and this is getting ready for the big push to get all the money together we need to buy these airframes. I mean, we've had great donations and support, but we go to a slightly higher level here at this point, so we need some very obvious public marketing going on. And that he is going to be a great help. I hope to be sitting down with him in the next few days, and there'll be a lot of announcements to come after that. But still on track, Martin, and really hoping to, to get all the deals signed, money paid, everything done this year. That's the ultimate goal. And it's been interesting seeing the reaction now that we've brought the Mount Cook 748 into the group of aircraft to save. Some of the stories coming out from those days in that part of the country and the pioneering, that was a real ballsy move for a private company in Christchurch to go out and buy a fleet of proper airliners in the operating environment, which was very restricted. It was very preferred to the government-owned airlines of the day. And to actually make a long-term success of it was a very, I'd say, ballsy move, back in the day.
Yeah, but they had a great plane.
Well, they did, and it did them well. It was incredibly reliable. But the fondness for that aircraft type, I've connected with now with a lot of the people who are still around from those days. They've got great stories, and they very fondly remember the aircraft. And I think they're going to be, a lot of Kiwis are going to be pleased when we can come out and say, okay, this is one of ours now. It's going to, by hook or by crook, it'll be home sometime, and it's going to be a great news for a lot of people. And this is what I really enjoy doing this project, is that it means you don't realize how much, because it means a lot to me, and I'm sure it means quite a bit to you. You're interested in aviation history. We talk about it a lot. It's certainly a personal interest of mine, and in a way I'm selfishly doing it for that. But I've realized I get stopped in the street now, Martin.
Yeah.
I had a guy the other day in Auckland on St. Patrick's Day, walking down the street, and this guy wearing a fake Viking sort of horn headset thing came right up to me and shook my hand and thanked me for what I was doing, and told me not to give up. And plenty of people, and when you get people stopping you in the street, you know it's at a certain level. You know it's at a certain level.
And I think I think the younger generation, the youth of today, they've probably forgotten what it was like before you had ubiquitous long distance air travel, because until that happened, New Zealand was pretty isolated.
Yeah. Well, it was the ship. It was the ship.
Yeah. Now people talk about, I'll go to LA, I'll go here, I'll go there, and while it might not be the cheapest flight in the world, but we're not going to go into that. It's easy. You jump on a plane.
Yeah.
You're there. Can you and you can say that about any country, but not when New Zealand is a special case in terms of isolation.
Well, I was talking to a friend of mine a couple of days ago who does a lot of, sort of like you in a way, does a lot of international work, but is called away at very short notice. He told me the other day, and this happens, he says, twice a month, 3 times a month sometimes. The other day, he got a message, we need to go see this particular customer, big tech customer. And he said, oh, okay, well, they can get in contact. And he says, no, you really need to be face to face. He said he went online, saw that there was a flight to the States in 4 hours, booked it, went to the airport, and he was there. This is what people can do these days.
Yeah, and in other countries, if you're in Germany or somewhere like this, there are alternatives not to get to America. But even if you needed to get to America back in the old days of shipping, it took you 3 or 4 days to get to the States.
Exactly. Well, no, try 5 or 6. Yeah. I think those liners, the idea was to get it done in 5, right? So yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway,
but now,
yeah.
Anyway, carry on.
No, I'm just saying that people coming up, I'm not used to people coming up to me in the street and singling me out to say, Kiwis are quite good. They don't say, they don't fawn over you. What they do is they say, don't give up. Please don't give up. Don't stop. Go all the way, and we're all behind you. Don't stop. For God's sake, don't stop. That's what you want to hear. I don't want to hear, oh, you're such a great guy, you know, whatever. That doesn't get the planes back. But what I like to hear is don't give up. Keep at it. Try anything you can. You know, everyone's like behind you. It's great.
It's good. Kiwi spirit, mate.
Yeah. And in fact, it was funny because I was with a colleague at the time, and they couldn't believe that, that people just randomly pick you out in the street and come up and do that, you know. But it was quite funny. So anyway, there'll be plenty of updates coming up shortly, and I want people to, for a moment, don't think things are happening. It's fits and starts. We have to go at the speed of everyone else. And you know, what do they say? Slowly, slowly catch the monkey. Is that the expression?
Slowly, catch the monkey.
Yeah. It's sort of like that. You've got to do things in the right order and just be ready to react and just keep pushing it forward. The other analogy, of course, is, you know, eating an elephant bite at a time. One day you get one more mouthful, you realize nothing's left. It's all been done. It's sort of kind of like that, but.
What is it about the English language and sort of sayings using tropical animals?
Yeah.
Catch monkeys, eat elephants. What's that about?
It must have something to do with the colonial period where, you know, Dr. Livingston, I presume, you know, was rolling through the air and
today I shall catch a monkey and then eat an elephant.
Yeah, but it's a slow process. We've found out to get the monkey. You got to try and persuade it and cajole it and don't alarm it. Yeah, and the elephant, make sure you got plenty of time because it's going to take you ages, you know.
Yeah.
But so I guess the next podcast we're going to be looking out for developments on the 737 MAX. Interesting that Kiwi Airlines didn't go there, right? Didn't go there. Or Air New Zealand anyway.
Yeah.
Didn't go there.
Yeah. Virgin's got an order for 40 of them or something.
What about Qantas, though? You'd think that they would have been right in, because they've got, I think, over 100 737-8s, NGs.
Yeah, well, you know, we know Qantas keeps planes flying around forever.
Yeah.
And interestingly enough, when the 737 MAX thing, the first accident happened, because I follow Virgin quite closely. I'm interested in Virgin. I fly them a reasonable amount because they're really cheap.
Yeah.
They're also, I think they're an airline which kind of has lost its way. I think when Virgin Blue started, I think it was a really good idea as a scrappy, low-cost airline.
I agree.
But when that guy Borghetti got kicked, or resigned from Qantas because he didn't get the top job, he then went to Virgin, and he's basically turned Virgin into a Qantas. You know, Qantas announce a route to Ayers Rock. Virgin does it the next day. Qantas goes and buys 717s to service Western Australia. Virgin buys them the next day. They are basically mirroring Qantas's every move, and as a result, I think they've lost it a bit. But anyway, they went off and ordered a whole lot of eight Maxes some years ago. And when the Lion Air accident happened, it seems that internally there's a bit of a push not to buy them, not because they're unsafe, but now the fact that they've had this issue, they've raised it again. Virgin's got one of the youngest fleets in the region. There's absolutely no reason for them to burden their balance sheet with all these new aircraft. And apparently there are people saying, let's just not buy them. And they had the guy who was meant to replace Borghetti, he left a month or so ago because he was the one saying, let's cancel the order. And they say, oh, that's incompatible with what we want to do and blah, 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 blah. But he was saying, it makes absolutely no sense to buy these planes. We don't need them.
Wow.
That's interesting. So whether or not Virgin will actually get them, it remains to be seen.
Well, if they've got a fleet that's young, there's nothing really pressing in the meantime, is there, to, like you say, encumber yourself with, because those Maxes are surely more expensive than
well, especially when you're in an airline which does not make money, right?
Yeah.
Virgin doesn't make money.
You just reminded me of just talking about that. I was going to mention earlier, forgot to, when we were talking about A380, and that is the whole NEO situation. And it seems like that's become a stalemate, hasn't it? Because there are not enough aircraft orders from Emirates to justify the two engine providers to sharpen up the performance of the engines. I think Rolls-Royce has said 38 sets of 4 engines isn't enough to develop it, and the other crowd, what are they, the independent engine
GE Engine Alliance.
Yeah, the Engine Alliance. They've said the same thing. So, I don't think Emirates are going to get the performance specs that they want from Airbus on the plane. And they're saying that those last, I think, is it 36 orders then are in doubt?
Yeah.
Crikey.
Yeah. I wonder how that'll affect Emirates' model, because they've worked this A380. They knew how to use it, and they understood that it was a flagship product. And once you cram in everyone back into a 777, will it be the same? I don't know.
Well, I mean, I don't think they'll let any of them go. They might let some of the old ones go, but with over 100 of them, I think, in the end. Though I don't know if that 36 was included in that 100. It might have been. There might have been a rollover order or something like that. But, they're going to have them for a long time yet, aren't they? And those ones that go back to Airbus, like the Lufthansa ones, surely they'll be turned around and put back out.
I don't know. Yeah, I'd hope so. I mean, it's interesting. I know several, actually a surprising number of elderly people. I'd call them elderly. Anyone who's slightly older than me is elderly.
Like me.
They only fly Emirates, right? They come to New Zealand to visit family. They only fly Emirates because it's the A380 that can get them from Liverpool or Manchester or wherever, from a secondary city all the way to Auckland.
Yeah.
And they will, even when Emirates tries to route them on a 777, I'll pay a bit more, or I'll wait a few days. I'm flying the A380. It's the only plane I want to fly on. And they're not big plane buffs.
No.
They just like it because it's big and quiet.
And that's what they understand. That's what they pick up, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, well,
that's quite interesting.
Yeah, that seems like a no-win. It's a stalemate, isn't it? When you've got the situation like that, if you could sell more planes, you'd get more efficient engines, and that would sell probably even more planes. But you can't. Obviously, Airbus they would have the resources to say to Rolls-Royce, for example, well, we'll fund the part of that development that you don't think you'll have returned in value, but they obviously don't have enough faith in the product to do that if they haven't done that.
No, they've got to put the money where it's best spent, and that'll be in A350 enhancements, probably the A350 11 or 1200 to take it to the 9X.
Yeah.
And geez, can you imagine the marketing nightmare Boeing would have had if they'd called the 777 the 777-9 Max or something, or the 777 Max? Oh, dear.
I think you want to drop that Max. In fact, that's a very good point. You might see that Max being dropped.
Yeah.
So you could call it, or you come up with some other fancy name, 737-8 something. But if you drop the Max, then that makes it indistinguishable from the earlier models in terms of the way it's described. That may well happen.
Confuse the customer. Call it the 737-9 Neo.
Yeah, but then Airbus is going to say, "Oi!" They probably trademarked that. I would imagine.
Yeah. Or the NNG, the new generation.
Well, isn't it Jurassic, Classic, Next Generation, and Max?
That's what they call it now.
Yeah. So. Jurassic.
I say bring back the 200.
Look, I remember a long time ago when Air New Zealand were getting ready to get rid of the 200s and bring in the 300s. I was talking to an engineer at the time, and my assumption was, that they'd all be looking forward to the 300. Even though it was still a very established model, it was a step up. And the guy actually said to me, he said, if you crunch the numbers and only did it on the numbers, the 200 is still ideal for our operation.
Yes. I've been on a number of machine upgrades where if you actually take all the emotion out of it and crunch the numbers, you do have to ask why people are doing it. But because I'm generally involved in the party selling the upgrades, I'm like, don't crunch them too hard.
Keep your mouth closed. In a country like New Zealand where there's no sector longer basically than Auckland and Invercargill, and that's the least travelled in terms of the jet route, you're talking Auckland to Wellington, Wellington to Christchurch, and Auckland to Christchurch, now Queenstown in there. The fuel burn differences over such short sectors are you almost can't see where they are.
Well, there's a very interesting paper that was put out by the Russian engineer who came up with the Sukhoi Superjet, the propulsion system on that. And one of the questions the American interviewer asked him is, why didn't you go for bigger bypass turbofans? And he basically came back with a very similar answer. He said, in the sectors this plane's designed to run, unless we're up in the high altitudes for a long period of time, the high bypass turbofans don't really bring anything to the economics. He said, so we've chosen the bypass, which is, yes, it's quite low, but it's the best for these short sectors.
Yeah, and that's kind of what that old JT8D was all about, right? I mean, low bypass, and sure, higher fuel burn, but in sectors of 40 minutes and 1 hour, it's bugger all.
Yeah.
Anyway, but of course it was the customer perception that they were dealing with, and you have to look like you're updating equipment. And people knew they'd been around for a long time, but really there was not much of a business case. I'm going back into the memory here, but back in the day, the cost of ownership, they're all paid down. It made more sense to hang on to the current fleet, but they went with the more modern one. You got the dog. I heard some birds squawking and faintly in the background.
Yeah,
earlier.
I'm outside. I'm walking around.
Yeah, it's going to be a great day in Brisbane.
No, it's a bit cloudy today.
Oh, okay. All right.
But it's hot. Geez, it's hot. It's hot for this time of year. Very hot.
Well, that's what people have been saying over here, that this summer seems to be longer than you would... daylight saving ends in a week and a half or a week.
And they haven't really had the summer rains here.
Oh.
So it's humid. It looks like, every night it looks like there's a storm cooking up, and there's been amazing lightning. But there's been no real, sort of couple of day downpours, nothing. Every now and again a storm pulls through, gets drenched, and makes everything muddy and then moves on.
Wasn't there a huge hailstorm in Sydney a couple of days ago or a week ago where, like, golf ball size, they always say that, don't they? Golf ball size hailstones falling.
Yeah, I tend to ignore the alarmist weather reporting here. It's crazy.
It's real bad when it's softball sized or baseball sized hail.
Yeah. We thought we were going to get hail here the other day, so everyone put their cars under cover, but then it didn't eventuate. Yeah.
Well, you can get things damaged, can't you? And if they're too big, you can punch holes in your nice BMW or whatever.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that's pretty well about it for the time being. Again, it's been a sad week and a half. We're all reeling, and it's sort of hard to be too jolly and up. But next podcast, we will have Captain Canada on. I'm also hoping to connect with a guy in the States who's had a lot to say about the 737 MAX situation. So we'll try and get a few comments from him. He's an airline pilot and quite knowledgeable, so working on that. But thank you to everybody who listens to the podcast and says they like it. Isn't that great, Martin? That
it is.
People like
it.
it.
It's very good.
Yeah,
it's very good. Yeah, we're getting a lot of downloads,
and we're just talking about the thing we like to talk about. So it's
we talk about it anyway.
Yeah. I mean, whether we're having we do it. We've done so many podcasts just between ourselves,
Yeah,
because we do like talking about those things. So. So thanks for listening, and we'll be back. It is a bit fits and starts because you're busy and you've gone back to Australia. I've been incredibly busy with broadcasting, as you can imagine, particularly in the last few days with what's been happening, and the news business has been full on. But we'll try and get to our next one maybe with not so much of a gap. All right.
See, just as we're speaking, I've just... there's two reports come in. So one on that Lion Air crash, that plane apparently was experiencing a similar incident a few days before, and only the fact that there was another pilot who was deadheading back to where he wanted to go. He went into the cockpit and he managed to help them out. And
I think he switched off the stab trim at the pedestal. Yeah.
Yeah, and then it says here, Lion Air pilots were scouring handbook in final moments before plane crash.
Ah, there you go. They're trying to find out why the thing wouldn't disconnect. What's going wrong? What the hell? It's that disconnect button problem. That's not the fundamental cause, but that's what confuses the pilots. That's because what do they say? Aviate, navigate, communicate.
Yeah.
And that aviate part you can be so distracted by something and... Yeah, I feel so sorry for them. God.
Yeah, nowhere does it say read the handbook. It's not aviate, read the handbook, navigate.
No.
It's just, yeah.
But you do that.
Shame.
You do that when you
Of course
can't
you do.
work out what's going. You think, what the hell is going on? I'm pushing the button. And the last model, of course, that you push the button, it disconnected, right? Boom. But on this one, it doesn't. And you're thinking, what the hell is going on? I'm doing everything. And they're looking up. They're looking at panels. If you switch, you can just imagine the desperation. My God.
I mean, how often have we been? No, I know I have. I've been caught out so often by unexpected behavior and upgraded software. Like we've installed a new version of some software. With you, it'd be video editing, or me, it might be, let's say Microsoft Word, and you put the new version in, and you think you're doing exactly the same thing as you did on the old version, and for some reason it's just not working. You know how frustrating that is, and you tend to concentrate on that.
I've had that in broadcasting, with a desk that's been set up a particular way, especially with the new digital gear that has been coming in, and you're pushing a button that normally starts something and nothing's starting, and you're thinking, what? And you're looking over the panel, you're looking at everything, what am I missing? Have I done something? And usually it's a simple thing. Oh, right, okay, that. Or it's a left field thing that exactly. It's the human condition. Like I say, if they were going through manuals, man, you imagine how desperate that was. Yeah, and then in a panic, how can you can't even find the right page, even if it is there. Oh, my God.
Yeah.
Anyway.
All right, then.
All right. Hey, good to hear. Good to talk again. And in the meantime, till the next podcast, it's goodbye from me and...
me.
See you later.
Cheers.